All right. And we have Michael. Welcome. One of our newest
Hi, how you
members.
doing?
Good, good. Most people trail in late or watch the recording, so I'm just gonna get started, guys, because I can't wait for what Elijah's got for us and for us all to walk away feeling much more centered. So welcome to today's Powerhouse webinar, Uncovering Happiness and Less Stress in a Chaotic World with Elisha Goldstein. I just want to thank our exclusive bank partner, CIBC, for making our webinars happen. And just for all of you who are here and whoever's watching the recording, we have some really exciting events coming up in the next couple of weeks. Our networking happy hour, our monthly networking happy hour is next Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Friendly reminder that you can actually bring guests. I don't know if you knew that. So if you have any awesome friends or people in your network that you think would love our speed networking, there's a form in the Facebook group that you can get them to fill out. Obviously, I'm so jazzed. I'm sorry, guys, that you can't join us at this one, but we have our Women's Leadership Power Hour coming up on March 11th in celebration of International Women's Day. It's going to be a speed mentorship style event. So excited for this. Applications are due Friday, February 26th. So if you are interested in participating, make sure you get your application in before that. And lastly, I just wanted to share with you all, I know some of you are in Mogul Cruise right now, but our second cohort starts April 15th and it's evolving. You know us, we always like to keep things exciting for you. And we're very excited to announce that we're going to be adding, along with the mastermind program, a mentorship opportunity. So you will have the opportunity to be matched with a mentor for 3 months. You'll meet twice with them over that 3-month period. So we're really excited. I don't want to spend the whole webinar talking about it, but we're going to have an open house on Thursday, March 18th at 10 a.m. And you can come and learn more about that. We'll be sharing who our confirmed mentors are and what the program will look like, along with more information on the mastermind if you guys haven't done that before. So enough from me. I'm going to introduce our special guest, Elijah. So Elijah is one of the world's most prominent mindfulness teachers. How lucky we are to have him, a clinical psychologist and founder of the Mindful Living Collective. And he's also created a bunch of programming, which he's going to share more about, I'm sure. And for the last 20 years, he's worked as a psychologist and mindfulness educator and has been at the forefront of integrating curriculum and training for therapists, educators, business professionals, parents, and others in the art and science of mindful living. His books include Uncovering Happiness, The Now Effect, a mindfulness-based stress reduction workbook. We all need that, especially right now. And the MBSR Everyday. I love this line, so I'm going to say it. In an increasingly fragmented society, he is working to bring people together so they may motivate and inspire one another in far-reaching ways. What a amazing why to exist, Elijah. So welcome.
Oh, it's great to be here with with everyone. And I was telling Victorian and some others who were here earlier that I had a funny moment this morning, which I think is a good way to start your day, and also kind of speaks to resiliency a little bit and how we can have a little bit more of that during these turbulent times. And where on my way here, I'm staying in San Diego right now because my house is my kitchen's having to be redone and things like that. And so I walk about 30 minutes to the place that I work every day while I'm here. And right when I was walking up the door, I saw my dog literally ate my lunch. And so, in a moment, that kind of moment's like a moment like, oh God, oh my God, I'm going to be late. I'm going to have to contact them and tell them I'm going to be late, and people are going to be on their line. And instead, what I was able to do was notice the stress reaction that was coming on. And I'll talk to this in a minute. And I was able to be aware of it and what the impact of being aware of it and being able to name it can have for us, and be able to soften my body, take a deep breath, and just get a little bit more of a brisk walk here than I typically do to get here on time. And then later have a really funny story to tell. So my dog literally ate my lunch, so, that's usually an excuse. Dog ate my homework, but there it is.
There we go.
And, okay, so let's talk about this. Like right now, there's a lot of, you guys are a lot of solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, and making it in a world that may be, the current conditions may be ones that are working for you, or you're having to pivot, or there may be different things that come up that make things really stressful. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about how stress works, what mindfulness is, how you can use it to your advantage, and some just key techniques that you can just weave into your day. We'll have a little bit of an experience that then we'll do a little bit of inquiry around afterwards, and we'll leave it open for any questions that anybody has at that point. You can also, by the way, just so you know, as we're doing this, just make it a little bit dynamic. If you have questions like while I'm talking or anything like that, don't feel like you need to silence yourself and wait for some time 45 minutes later or half an hour later. Just go ahead and you raise your hand or whatever, and we'll make it work like that.
Yeah, it's a small group. So, guys, if you have any questions that come up, I know I have a few that I want to ask, but feel free to ask them as Elijah bestows his wisdom on us.
Yeah, or just experience. Who knows if it's wisdom or not? Um, so listen, so when we talk about stress, does anyone here have that type of thing in this world? I think right now, I just looked at the news this morning, and and none of you are probably in Texas, I'm guessing. You're more kind of New England, East Coast is my guess, Toronto, that sort of side of the world. And right now, Texas is under like deep, massive freeze, down here, and they're like isolated completely. The way they set up their electric grid, is separate from everyone. That's the way they chose to do it because it's cheaper for them, and to do it that way. But when catastrophes like this happen, they're sort of, isolated. So things like this happen, deep freezes, getting caught off guard. I sometimes liken it to, we're on a raft down a river, and right now it's kind of a turbulent river. It's kind of a roaring rapid. And if you're on that raft alone, it's a pretty scary thing. And that's why you guys have joined City Moguls, because when you have people on that raft, it feels a little bit better. And, Vic just talked about this mentorship program. If you have a guide there and mentors there, you're way likely to feel safer, on the way. But stress is a normal part of life. And and stress gets a bad rap in some ways. There's positive stress. Stress is there to give us energy, encourage us. It's there to, get us motivated. It tells us that there's an exciting time that's happening right now. We're on the brink of change and a shifting something potentially. It's a call to rise up. So it's all those things. At the same time, mostly what it happens to us during times of stress is we get fragmented and we get frazzled, and we make quick decisions and we make mistakes, and we don't go with our gut, we don't go with our wiser self in that moment. We don't take a pause, a step back, and really reflect on things. And so stress happens as a loop. So you can consider it a loop, and this is all important because it's going to help you see it and name it, so you can tame it and you can make better choices and walk with a little bit more ease, in your daily life, and be more focused on the things that matters. So think of an event that happened in your life that's stressful. There's an event that happens. Typically, it could be an internal event. You're remembering something, or your mind is anticipating something that's coming up. Or it could be something that happened externally, like you got an email, or you walked in the middle of the street and weren't paying attention because you were looking at your phone and a car was coming towards you. It could be any of those things, right? And what happens is the first thing your brain does is it makes an interpretation. This is good or bad, right or wrong, fair or unfair, dangerous or safe. It's the first thing it does. Then if it inclines towards something that is speaks of something that's uncertain or dangerous, what's going to happen is it's going to interpret it like that, and it's going to kick your nervous system into gear. So that basically is your fight, flight, freeze response. So it's now a physiological reaction that's happening in your body, right? That's really important to know, and because oftentimes what happens, the first thing that happens when we start to feel stress is we go up into our heads and we start worrying or catastrophizing or thinking, or we start remembering past events. That your brain's going through a Rolodex of past events to try and figure out, what do I know from history to keep me safe in this moment or to make the best choice or whatever, but it's doing that automatically. And that could lead to paying attention to negative events more often, because your brain's wired to survive, not be happy and successful. It's just not. We're wired to survive and procreate at the base, right? Your brain could care less whether you're successful or happy. It doesn't really matter to it. And so, at least to the faster and stronger foundations of it. So it will do those two things. And so meanwhile, you're having a physiological reaction that then leads to an emotion. The emotion might be fear or frustration or irritation or anxiety. Think of some kind of uncomfortable emotion. That's information that's saying we're imbalanced right now. And your brain's wants to do is create balance. It doesn't like when it's imbalanced. It doesn't like when it's unsafe or uncomfortable or uncertain. We thrive on certainty, at least at the foundation, because again, we're wired to be safe and survive. So it wants to move towards certainty. That's why it's going towards the future and the past. That's why it's going towards worst case scenarios, potentially. Anyone here that struggles with anxiety, that's why your brain does that. It's because it's trying to figure out all the possible scenarios out there so it can guard against those. Meanwhile, you're thinking of all the worst case scenarios and you're just feeling really anxious. And when fear and uncertainty are combined together, that's when you experience anxiety. And anxiety is not really a supportive emotion for you to be focused on what you want to focus on. It's not good for optimal learning and integration. Stress is okay, but anxiety, remember, those are two different things. Stress is a natural state, a natural experience that we all experience. There's positive stress and negative stress, but anxiety is what has multiplied by at least a factor of 4 in the last year in the United States, but I'm sure in Canada too, all over the world. The survey just came out, typically that measures people's states of anxiety, and usually it's about 1 in 12. This was in America. 1 in 12 people in the U.S. experience symptoms of anxiety through the year, or that would be called anxiety disorder. And this year they did this exact same survey, and it was 1 in 3. So, we're all under similar causes and conditions, right? Toronto's not experiencing a great time with COVID right now.
Yeah,
Maybe it got better since last time we talked.
We're still in lockdown technically, and like
Okay.
I just put in the chat, and guys feel free to share how you, like, for me, anxiety has been like a big thing over the past year. Never really felt it before, but this last year it's kind of like creeped in, and I know there's people on the call that resonate with this, and I can't pinpoint where it's coming from.
It's just statistically, that's the case in here too. We're all kind of in that boat. It's coming from, all the various sources that it's coming from, which is I'll just say one thing about that is that we're maybe brought up or taught in some way that and our eyes see this, and seeing is believing, that we're separate from one another. And we're separate from our environment. We're physical bodies encased in flesh, and we kind of see like, hey, this is me and this is a plant. We're two separate things, right? But studies show that when we're in relationships with plants, live plants in the workplace, we're more productive. We feel better. We're happier. We're more satisfied with our work environment. And so really the reality is, if we get down to the more granular level, we're actually all fairly interconnected. There is a flowing of information and energy that's coming from me to you right now. I'm giving you ideas. It's sparking in your mind something, and you'll remember some things. So I've transferred something to you, right? And when you're around people who are really anxious and you can feel it, or they're really irritable, you also get some of that, right? So we're all interconnected. And so when you say, where's this anxiety coming from? Well, it's in the air. So you're feeding off that. The people you're connecting with and contacting with, the news that you're reading, everything is causing and inhaling certain energy and information, literally. And so we take it on. That's kind of what it is. So it's upon us to say, whoa, man, I don't want to take that on. I need to recognize this and rebalance. So what do we do? So we notice that our brain makes a certain interpretation that creates a certain physiological reaction, which creates an emotion. Emotion is, you can think of emotion, the word, emotion, energy in motion, right? So it's a certain energy that's there. And then that leads to a certain behavior. And the behavior might be, I can't sit here and work any longer. I got to focus on something else. Or what was that news piece I needed to get? Or maybe let me just flip through the social media because there's something soothing about it. Or let me grab that bag of potato chips. Or let me think about this more, because this is really important stuff to think about, this anxiety, this anxious, whatever, or my business not working like I want it to work, or, and meanwhile, we're distracted from focusing on what really matters, right? The number one bad habit we have isn't not exercising too much, or overeating, or sleeping too much, or drinking too much, or any of that. The number one bad habit we have is thinking. We allow our brain to think in ways that take us away from what we really want to focus on, what's really most important to focus on. So in one way that we can recognize when we're in this kind of imbalanced state, a very simple way to bring us back into balance, is recognizing that this is physiological. It's not just mental, it's physiological, and our body is a barometer for how we're feeling moment to moment. So we come to our body, we use our body, and all we're doing here, it's so simple, is recognizing when in the day or where in the day is my body bracing. Because the moment my body's tensing, it's guarding against something, and it's in a nervous system reaction. So it's imbalanced. The moment it's bracing, it's imbalanced. And again, a little bit of bracing is okay, because you might find when you're really focusing on your face is tensing, or when you're really engaged in something, you might be tensing a little bit. But it's just in the day to day, you notice your mind's just kind of going and your body's bracing. When you notice that and become aware of it, that's when you notice where it is, and you soften your body, take a deep breath, exhale. And then what you're doing in that moment is you're rebalancing your nervous system. So I'm going to give you a 3-step process in a minute that's going to make this really simple on how to step off of the autopilot that's more anxiety, or maybe more leading to more depressed mood or something like that, and to be able to refocus on what matters. So mindfulness is the tool for this. And mindfulness over the past 20 years. So my story is I was in San Francisco during the dot-com boom, and I was working hard, really hard. I was working 7 to 7. I got my sisters were recruiters, so I got recruited into this outside telecom agency, and at that point we were reselling long distance lines to companies, right? Seems like the dinosaur ages. So that's what we were doing, right? There was we were actually using Rolodexes to like go after our customers. The computers weren't really like used mainly. It came like a couple of years later till that happened. I was the first of my friends to get a cell phone. So because a lot of them went to graduate school, and I went straight into the corporate world. And so what happened was I was working hard, I was playing a whole lot harder, and I was really successful at what I was doing. And that was the first time that I was so successful at one thing, which was selling. I was really successful at selling. And the problem was I also got involved with partying like crazy. And you'd see me south of Market Street in San Francisco, like, up all night. And it didn't matter, because I was so successful that like I had no indicator that, things were off. And then I realized that, and I had an intervention with my family, and I went away to this like retreat for a month. And that's when I learned more about mindfulness. And so I went away to this retreat, and this guy came to me with an orange, and he's like, well, let me show you something. And I'm like, whatever, I don't even want to be here. And but I was entertaining. He goes, just entertain me for a moment. You see this orange? And I said, sure. And he said, okay, I want you to just follow my instruction and do something with it. I'm like, okay. So he said, take the orange and look at it. Tell me what you see. So it's orange, and it has dimples, in it. And he said, okay, now peel it back, and just peel it back slightly slower than you might normally peel it back, and tell me what you see. And I peeled it back, and like the zest went like that in the orange. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa, I don't usually see that, just like shot up into the air. He's like, what do you see in the orange itself? I'm like, okay, I see veins and membranes. And as I peeled it apart, like juice started to come out of it a little bit. And he asked me to smell it, and then he asked me to taste it. He said, taste it, just put it on your tongue and just kind of bite it down slightly slower than you might normally do. And just tell me where you notice it in your mouth and how it tastes. And I put it in my mouth, and like, it was like an explosion, like all throughout my mouth, like this taste. And I didn't even notice where my taste buds were in the past. I never really paid attention to that. And it was like the tastiest orange I'd ever tasted in my entire life. And he said, how does your body feel right now? I said, it feels like more relaxed than it has in a really long time. And he said, well, what would the days, weeks, and months ahead be like if you had a little bit more of this? And I said, sign me up. Where do I find it? And so that was my introduction to mindfulness. So mindfulness just means awareness. It's a strength and a skill that anyone can build to come down from their mind and back into their life, to bring more confidence around your mental faculties so that you can feel a greater sense of control and confidence in your life. It's really what it is. So 20 years ago, when I got involved with this, was when the first neuroscience studies started to come out around it. This guy, Jon Kabat-Zinn, who some of you might be familiar with, or you may not, created this program called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. That's the workbook. The first book that I wrote was based on that program. Extremely popular global program. Probably 1 million people have taken that program. And so that him and this guy, Richie Davidson at the University of Wisconsin got together, brought people went into a biotech firm and brought them through a program. And they studied them. What was the impact of this? And they showed statistically significant results around stress reduction. But what's more interesting was their brain scans. So what they showed was that people who went through this program had a better immune system response too, but showed that they had activation in this area of your brain is called the prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead here. And it's involved with emotion regulation, probably an important thing for us that's why humans, have this kind of, it's the most evolved area that we, and dolphins also have it. And some animals have thin slices of it too. And as it turns out, rats also have a thin slice of this. And so, but it's involved emotion regulation, impulse control. It's the part that goes down to the emotional part of your brain, which is more of a core area that every mammal and reptiles even have. And so it goes down there and says like, hey, I see you, you're stressing out or you're imbalanced. Let's chill you out for a moment and let's get some perspective. That's basically what that part of your brain is for. The left side of it lights up when you have positive emotions, when you feel really good. The right side of it lights up when you're not feeling that well. So the left side also lights up when you're approaching things in life, you're moving towards something. The right side lights up when you're moving away from something, when you're avoiding things in life. When we're bracing, we're avoiding something. We're trying to avoid something. When your face is bracing, when you're talking with someone, let's say when you're talking with a client or someone you care about, an intimate partner or a friend, you notice your face bracing, you're probably guarding against some feeling that you're having in that moment. That means you're not aware of it and you're not in control of it. So what they found was people who went through this program showed this activation, this left prefrontal cortex. Now, let me explain to you why that's important. If you were not feeling well, let's say you're feeling anxious or stressed or depressed or something like that, and you were walking down the street and you saw someone walking toward you across the street, and you saw them as a friendly acquaintance, maybe someone that you networked with in the past or anything like that, and you smiled and you waved, and they just looked at you and walked on by, you would feel one way. Maybe like, what did I do wrong? Or what something happened in the last meeting that we had? Or what a jerk that person is. Or it would be, if you were just got off, you just like your business exploded, right? You just had the best day of your life. And that same exact event happened, you would be like, I wonder if they didn't see me. Or, I wonder if they're worried about something. Something's on their mind or whatever. My business is awesome, or I'm having a great day, whatever. I don't even care. And so the important part of that is when we're feeling well, when we're feeling more positive emotions, we tend to feel more resilient. Mindfulness helps us feel more resilient in our life because when we're bracing, if we can do something like, let's say, this stop practice, right? And you can go online on my YouTube channel, you can just look up on my website or something like that. You can do this over and over again. I have a video of it, it's no problem. Stop stands, has anyone heard of this practice? No? Okay, so stop stands for stop, take a deep breath, observe your experience. Observe just means you're in your experience with three things happening. You have physical sensations that are happening, you have an emotional experience that you're experiencing, and you have a certain quality of your attention, or you have things on your mind. And so if you stop, take a breath, observe, and then proceed by asking yourself the question, what do I really want to focus on right now? Or what do I actually need right now in this moment? You will move towards rebalancing. So let me tell you, there's a quote by this guy, Viktor Frankl. Has anyone heard of that guy? Yeah, you've heard him? A couple of you? Okay, so Viktor Frankl was a neurologist and a Holocaust survivor, and he wrote a mega world best-selling book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he has a quote that's been attributed to him that says, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So in between the moments something happens and we react to it, which happens all the time, there's a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. If we can dip into that space, we can be more aware of the choice points that are there. When we're stressed, that space gets really tight. So what our brain does is it reaches back in its Rolodex and it says, what do I do? So it takes the road most traveled, whatever it is, because there's not a lot of time to think about it. So it just kind of goes, just like if you were to take a bucket of water and pour it down a hill over and over and over again, eventually it would create probably two paths. One would be a really deep groove and one would be a really not so deep groove. And it would continue, if you just poured that water down there, it would continue to go down the deeper groove. That's just how nature works. And that's how this would work too. We take the road most traveled. But if we can learn to widen that space between stimulus and response, dip into that space of awareness in our life. And again, this is just something, it's like riding a bike or playing guitar or learning how to type or whatever. It's just practice and repetition. It's just a habit. It's no different than anything else you've ever learned how to do. It's just something you learn. You can learn to widen that space to get better and better at it. So you can say, well, hold on a second. What are my choices here? I don't need to react with the road most traveled. Like that's how we get into unhealthy patterns in our relationships and in our business and with ourselves. And then we wake up 40 years later and say like, well, what happened? Like, how come I still get involved with these crappy relationships over and over again? How come my business is in the same place it was for the last 20 years? Or how come I still keep falling into bouts of anxiety? Or how come I still keep falling into bouts of depression? Or how come I keep, whatever it is, we just take, our brain's just gotten used to the groove.
So Elijah,
yeah.
I just want to come back to those 3 steps because I'm like on the edge of my seat and I don't want us to run out of time. And I know you wanted to do an exercise with us too. So what are those 3 steps for like refocusing, like when you're in that space between stimulus and response? Like
first I want to give you that practice and I want to do it with everyone, right?
Okay, great.
3 steps are something different. So that was an acronym called STOP, right? So that's a practice and I want to give you that. So the brace thing is something you want to be able to look at on your daily life, right? Just where am I bracing? Simple thing to practice, right? That doesn't take you any extra time to do. But if you do that with some level of practice and repetition, you'll get better and better at it and you'll create more mastery around your stress. The second is a practice. It's called STOP. Stop, take a deep breath, observe your experience. Those are 3 things: body, emotions, thoughts, right? And then in that, what you've done with the stop practice is you've widened that space between stimulus and response now. So if you do that with some level of repetition, your brain will get used to widening that space between stimulus and response, and you'll be able to dip into it easier because your brain has something called implicit memory. And when you practice, or procedural memory, or call it a habit, and when you practice something with some level of repetition, it gets easier. So that's it. It'll get easier to widen that space between stimulus and response. That's the stop practice will help you do that, and the brace, 2 practices. So we'll do that practice in a moment so you can experience it. The three things, I have another formula that I created that's called recognize, release, refocus. 3 R's. Recognize, release, refocus. So the first is recognize when you're bracing. Let's just call it stress. You can do this with any emotion. If you're someone who falls into bouts of fear, if you fall into bouts of frustration, irritation, and anger, if that's your issue, if you fall into bouts of feeling sorry for yourself or self-criticism or blaming yourself all the time, any kind of negative thinking in that way, you can recognize that. So what do you do when you recognize that? You're bringing blood flow from the center of your brain, which is the emotional center of your brain, over to the prefrontal cortex. And because when you name something, you can think of that as phrase, if you can name it, you can tame it. So if you name something, right? If you name something, you are literally, there's tons of neuroscience around this. You're literally bringing blood flow to this part of your brain so it can go down to the emotional center and say, hey man, what's going on? And so we recognize it. That's the first step. Okay, here I am. Now we recognize it. We're in that space between stimulus and response. We've just like dipped in there for a moment. Then what we do is we recognize, and this all ties into everything we've been talking about. Then we go back into our body and we say, okay, this is a physiological thing. I need to release it. So what's my best way of releasing tension or holding in my body, right? So what we want to do is we want to think about that. Consider that for a second. What's my go-to release? That could just be softening my body. Where's the tension? I'm going to do a gentle stretch. That could be like doing a dance. That could be like, sitting in some place and just yelling at the top of your lungs. That could be, what's my release activity? Like, what is it? Like, what's going to be for me? But it has to be something physical. It has to be something physical, like there. That's the release. Then now what you've really done is you widen that space between stimulus and response. So now we can, now we have space to drop in the question. That's the question. What do I need right now, or what's most important to focus on? Depends, right? So this is also how you turn emotional obstacles into strengths. Because now the emotional obstacles, the stress, the frustration, the anxiety, the anger, the fear, whatever it might be, whatever you feel like your obstacle is, what gets in your way, now becomes an opportunity. Why is it an opportunity? Because we need it to create this, to embolden the strength. We need it. You can't build that strength without the struggle. So it becomes now an opportunity to build a particular strength. So when we practice and repeat that, recognize, release, refocus, then what happens is with some level of repetition, the anger comes up, the frustration, the sadness, the anxiety, the fear, whatever are the negative thinking, the self-blame, the self-criticism, the doubt that I can do this, that I can grow my business in the way that I want to grow it. We become more confident around it because we say, wow, I've met this in this way. Every time your brain gets enough repetition with that it says, you know what, no matter what comes my way, I can handle it. I'm going to be okay. I've shown myself that over and over again. Okay, so let's do this practice. These are all like highly practical things. By the way, I've worked with people, thousands and thousands of people on this. They've overcome agoraphobia, coming out of their house, like something extreme as that, right? Overcome the ability to have self-doubt because they've been to move through it. It's all mental. It's a mental game, that we're working with here. I mean, obviously our mind and our body is completely interconnected. So that's why it's physiological, but it's just all stemming from stories in our minds that we need to be able to meet, get into that space and be able to move through and then get to the other side. So we recognize what we need to focus on, what we need, and we get better and better at moving in the direction in the way that's going to help us be most successful, personally and professionally. So, okay, let's do this practice, a stop practice. I want you to have an experience of this. So very simple. Again, we're going to stop. We're going to take a couple deep breaths, or you can take as many as you want. And then I'm going to guide you through this observation process. Take like a minute. This whole thing will take like 2 minutes. So I'll say, just get into a comfortable position. I'll invite you, because this is an internal practice, to close your eyes. If you don't want to, that's perfectly okay. Just keep kind of a gaze towards your lap. That's fine too. So let's start off by we're pausing right now and just taking a couple deep breaths, maybe in through your nose, out through your mouth, an opportunity to just release into this space. Now beginning to bring our beginner's mind to this moment, as if this was the first time you were meeting it, a sense of curiosity, and just noticing your body sitting here, noticing the positioning of your body, just being curious about that. And also how your body's feeling. You might even move through it from your feet all the way to the top of your head, being aware if there's any areas that you're noticing any tension or holding. Maybe there's other areas that feel quite comfortable. If there are areas that are holding or feel tension, see if you can allow them to soften, or make a choice right now to do a gentle stretch to open that area of your body. Just releasing a little bit more with the exhale, imagining that tension just flowing right out. Also being aware of what's here emotionally right now. It could be as simple as feeling comfortable or uncomfortable or neutral, or maybe there's an underlying feeling of restlessness or anxiousness, or maybe calm and ease. It's an opportunity to investigate, what's here emotionally. Be noticing where you feel that in your body. And also being aware of the quality of your attention. Does your mind seem distracted and cluttered? And if so, just name that. That's perfectly fine. Soften your body, come back. Or does it seem like it's able to hone in on this? Or maybe there's certain things on your mind that you want to be aware of. And proceed by asking yourself the question, in my day-to-day, after this call is over, what's going to be the one thing that's going to be important for me to attend to? And how do I want to show up? Okay, and we end just by acknowledging yourself for taking this time and doing this practice, and then just opening your eyes if they're closed. Okay, let's get some feedback on that. What did you notice? What came up for you in that practice? What were you aware of? Not like, I noticed that was good, or I noticed that was bad, or I noticed that this. I'm more curious about, if you were an investigator of your life, what were you aware of in that practice? What did you notice physically, emotionally, mentally? Doing a little inquiry. So go ahead and just pop off mute and go ahead and say that.
Or you can put it in the chat if you guys want.
Or you can put it in the chat.
Yeah.
If you're feeling shy, you can put it in the chat.
I noticed I was like clenching my jaw so much, and I had no idea when to like finally release it. I was like, oh, I wonder why I was clenching my jaw so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. What was it like? Then what happened after you released it?
Then I started listening. I was like very heightened to my auditory senses, so I could like hear the TV on downstairs. I was like, I wonder what my boyfriend's watching. Like, you know?
That's good. What else?
Yeah. Anyway, I would love someone else to share.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that I needed to close my eyes. If that sounds so weird, but my eyes, like I'm staring at the screen all morning, and I'm like stressed, or I'm in stress, but because you're like focusing, you may not realize like I need to take a moment to actually close my eyes and like release into that eye closing position. Okay. Like, because it feels kind of funny if you don't take a moment in the middle of the day to close your eyes, right? Or like, so I realized I need to close my eyes, which allowed me to realize how tired I am at this moment.
Yeah. And what would the I'm curious about that, Ria. What would the days, weeks ahead be like if there was more moments of being aware of that and taking some action?
When I'm tired, like if there's more, well, I should sleep more in general, but I guess I'm realizing I need more sleep in that sense, like that I'm not sleeping enough. Maybe I feel like I'm awake because I'm a very early riser. So I wake up and I'm awake for long periods of time, but maybe I'm in a season where I need more sleep than I realize. So I need to give myself that leeway to have more sleep, maybe, and I'll feel better and like be more productive. This is my realization in front of all of you. Thank you for listening.
That's so incredibly practical.
Thank you.
Yeah, and can be incredibly impactful. Sleep is the foundation of feeling like awake and focused in life. And as a Canada and the U.S. the same. We sleep is a huge epidemic here, and we don't really realize it. And our tech hasn't really helped with that. And I mean, there are things in our tech that try and help with that, right? And sleep apps and various things like that now. But typically, yeah, it's hard, right? And that's such a good realization, so powerful. Even rest, would be really helpful versus even taking a moment to just pause and close my eyes in the day for a couple minutes. What impact would that have? That's interesting to consider. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. What else? Anybody else?
Similar experience.